Hello and welcome to this podcast episode of G-Talk Ask the Expert. GLP is a leading global investment manager and business builder in logistics, real estate, infrastructure, finance and related technologies, and in Europe claims over 30 years of experience in logistics real estate. Operating in 12 countries with over 4.5 million square metres of logistics space and another 3.4 million square metres awaiting development. They have over 10 billion euros worth of assets under management across Europe. Today, I'm joined by three experts. Natali Cooper, who is Head of Portfolio and Asset Management and ESG at GLP Europe.
Hello.
Hello, Natali. Richard Allington, who is Technical Asset Manager at GLP.
Hello.
Hi, Richard. And Steve Malkin, who is the Chief Executive and Co-founder of PlanetMark.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Stephen. So welcome to all of you. Let's begin by asking each of you to say a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Natali, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm Natali Cooper. I'm heading Portfolio and Asset Management for GLP Europe. This consists in ensuring that we have the best practices across our entire real estate portfolio as we are invested in 12 countries. So we need to ensure some homogeneous approach to asset management and supervising the asset management strategies. I also fulfill the role of Head of ESG for Europe, which entails drafting, the policies, putting in place the measures, the initiatives to ensure that we keep the business aligned with the business objectives in terms of ESG.
And ESG is becoming a much bigger thing right across the portfolio and for investors, isn't it?
Completely right.
Yeah.
It's becoming a priority for the business, but also for all our stakeholders.
Richard, how about you?
Hi, so I'm Richard Allington. I'm the Technical Asset Manager for GLP in the UK. I look after the UK portfolio, which currently consists of 45 properties as we speak, although that's growing week on week over the next few weeks. I tend to get involved with our assets once they achieve practical completion and once they're let to our customers. And then I'm the sort of single point of contact between GLP and our customers throughout their lease term, and just making sure that our customers are happy and comfortable with their operations out of our buildings. And if there's anything that we can do to help them in that respect, then that's where I get involved.
Excellent. And how about you, finally coming to you, Steve? Tell us a bit about PlanetMark and how it came about.
Sure thing, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Steve Malkin. I'm CEO and founder of PlanetMark. And the PlanetMark is a certification to show that organisations are embracing sustainability, if you like. But it's really based on the measurement and reduction of carbon emissions year on year for all types of organisations. And we sort of launched back in 2013 now, so it's 9 years ago, coming up for our 10th anniversary. And we sort of were a startup at the time with sort of fairly deep knowledge in real estate and organisations generally in around sort of sustainability and taking action on climate. And since that time, we've grown to a team of over 60 people now. We certify, hundreds of organisations, from SMEs through to, large corporates and, working across, all sectors, which is tremendously exciting because you can share knowledge, from one sector to another and share a lot of learning. But a lot of our work is and continues to be in real estate because we understand that there's so much carbon, not only in the construction of buildings, but also in the operation of buildings. So we certify both, in construction and at that point where they turn into, operating assets.
Well, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of that during this podcast. But you launched in 2013 with Sir Tim Smith from the Eden Project, is that right?
It is right. Yeah, we chose to do something slightly different from, if you think back, it's quite a way now back into 2013 and what the sort of, the scene looked like then. We wanted to ensure that we were measuring reducing carbon, based on evidence-based data. So it's super technical, but we also recognise that, an importance, of working with people and also working in harmony with nature was sort of critical for success in sustainability and particularly climate. So we approached the Eden project to sort of partner so we could put a little bit of Eden in each project, so a bit of sort of connection with people and a bit of a connection with nature as well. And we still carry that through to today.
Excellent. The subject of today's podcast is PlanetMark accreditation and a new joint initiative being launched by GLP and PlanetMark. At the moment, the news is dominated by the situation in Ukraine and the unfolding crisis there, and this is going to have profound global political and financial ramifications. Yet in November, and the COP26 conference in Glasgow, the talk was all about climate change. And climate change is a crisis that hasn't gone away. In February of 2022, the UN International Panel on Climate Change published a second report, Climate Change 2022, assessing the impacts, adaptations and vulnerabilities to climate change. And in April of 2022, the third report was published with the phrase, "It's now or never to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees." It means that every and any effort towards reducing carbon emissions is still vital to the planet's survival. Steve, what do you think?
I think everything that you've just picked up on there demonstrates that we have huge interrelated issues. And maybe I could just pick up on those as a sort of a scene-setting sort of piece, I suppose, and come along the way to reducing carbon and what we can do about it. But if you look at what's happening, with the tragedy in Ukraine, it's, first and foremost, it's a humanitarian crisis, and it has sent shockwaves around the world. But what we're also seeing is the role that energy plays within that crisis and how we are dependent on fossil fuels and, supply from different states. And I think what this has sort of brought into focus is that, we need, countries, people around the world need energy independence. Yeah. And I think what we're seeing here is that this is going to drive the move to renewables. And it's certainly absolutely happening in the UK. And we can see with offshore wind and investment in solar and so on. So these huge interrelated crises, actually are sort of focusing a lot of attention now, on this sort of it's now or never, in terms of the climate. So, whilst there is an energy crisis where we'll be moving away from fossils into renewables, we need that desperately because, the latest report is, saying absolutely that we need to hit peak carbon by 2025. And that's just 2 or 3 years away. We need to be reducing our global emissions by 50% by 2030. And we need to be, doing all of that work along the way to what we call net zero, which was, the big subject and the big sort of focus at COP26. So despite so much happening in and around us, and it seems almost, too much to take in, these interrelated huge issues are actually, I think, focusing our attention on what we can do as part of that sort of goal for energy independence, shift to renewables, decarbonisation and serious action on climate, which includes net zero.
Natali, how important is net zero to GLP?
Well, I could only resonate what Steve is saying. I mean, even before the Ukrainian crisis and the realization that we all intellect from an energy perspective, net zeros have always been on GLP's radar. As a developer of logistics space, we felt responsible for trying to find solutions into minimizing the carbon emissions. And we actually delivered our first net zero building for magnitude in the UK. And on the back of that, we just have learned so much on how to approach a project, and that you can very easily, actually, with engaging with the supply chain and your constructors and your designers and your architects, really work on a much more sustainable buildings. So using magnitude as a U-turn kind of approach to say it's achievable and you can do it.
Magnitude was the world's first net
Correct.
Zero for construction project, wasn't it, in logistics? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of questions, about carbon footprint and reduction is that how are we going to do it? And when you realize that you can deliver such a project, then the next and the following one are just coming up more naturally.
Okay, well, this is net zero for construction, so while you're building. But then, Planet Mark, you get involved once a building has been constructed and once it's occupied, is that right?
It's both, actually. And so this is the exciting sort of work that that GLP do, that we do, and some others, but could be sort of stretched so much further. So just to take Natalie's point about in construction and how exciting that is to bring stakeholders like your design team and architects and everything to look at the whole life carbon of a building in construction, because so much carbon is emitted in that phase of a building's life, in the first months or years of its life. And this is where developers and constructors and main contractors and investment funds can have such a huge positive influence. So we certify up to that point, the point where, say, Richard takes over at PC and into occupation. And so we can take what should be a highly energy efficient building into the occupier, into the tenant, engage with that tenant to help them continue that sustainability journey of the property. So to minimize its emissions on an ongoing basis over its 30 or 60, life period, by working with the tenants to help them measure and reduce carbon, energy, water, waste, and save money at the same time.
Okay, well, before we get into the nitty-gritty of that and how you achieve that, Natali, as we mentioned earlier, ESG is becoming increasingly important and moving up the agenda for investors. How important do you think this Planet Mark initiative is going to be for investors?
I think it's just bringing to life what we're trying to do. Our investors are asking constantly the same question, and rightly so. How are you aligned, with a net zero pathway to net zero? How do you actually ensure, or can you demonstrate measurable, tangible initiatives that you take? And at the back of that, they're also asking, well, it's all good that you say what you're saying you're doing, but how do we have evidence to prove that you're doing it the right way? So this Planet Mark program is actually ticking a lot of boxes along, giving comfort to investors that obviously there is an alignment in the general strategy of reducing carbon footprint. Planet Mark program is something tangible. It's a measure that you can actually demonstrate, and you see the positive and the added value to that, to the customers, but also to the property. And we have a third party with extremely deep expertise and knowledge that can certify and assess that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, so obviously for construction, once you've handed it on to the occupier, handed it on to your tenants, you can't really stop them leaving the doors open and leaving the lights on all night, can you? But this scheme is a way of engaging with them and continuing the net zero journey. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, exactly. So as you say, we're not in direct control of our customers in terms of leaving doors and windows open, lights on and so forth. But that's where the Planet Mark scheme plays an important role. So originally as a business, we were a development business, and our focus was solely on land acquisition and construction. So we'd build logistics premises and sell them on. As the business has evolved, we've become a fund manager, seeking investment to retain and manage all that we build and more. And with that comes an asset management and a facilities management angle. So whilst we're wanting to support our customers and their operations out of our assets through the implementation of innovative and green initiatives aimed at reducing their costs, we also have a responsibility to our investors, for whom ESG is high on the agenda. The Planet Mark schemes are very much complementary scheme in this regard. It supports our customers with their ESG strategies and carbon reduction targets, and at the same time demonstrates to our investors our alignment with their ESG strategies in terms of continual improvement of the environmental performance of their investments.
Well, there's two different aspects of the Planet Mark scheme there, isn't it? You're saying it's complementary to the work that you've done on net zero and during the construction and into the operational phase. But on this particular initiative, it's complementary, i.e. free to your tenants.
That's right. It's a follow-on step, in effect, from certifying our construction or the assets under construction and then taking that on into the actual operation of the property itself.
Steve, tell us a little bit about how the Planet Mark accreditation and certification works. What's the process? What do you do?
Sure thing. So we try to keep things really simple. So we find that sustainability can be sometimes rather complex. So we just try and distill it down to some simple steps. So we kind of have 3 steps that we talk about, which is about measurement, engagement and communication. So for us, the starting point is always about measuring stuff really, really well. So with this program and working in collaboration, both with the tenant and also with GLP, we work for the tenant, first of all, to sort of say, right, can we get some data from you, which is in around your energy consumption, might be electricity, it might be gas, but other things that could, constitute impacts within their carbon footprint, which could be, the amount of water they use and the sort of waste and whether it's recycled and so on. So we do a bit of a data grab and we measure a carbon footprint with them, encourage them to set a minimum target of around about a 5% annual reduction in carbon emissions. And that's their sort of baseline and their reduction target. And so the next thing we want to do is sort of engage their people in the process. So it's not always about parachuting sort of consultants in. What we find working with businesses, you've engaged their employees. The employees really want to do this stuff. So set up a green team, say, this is your carbon emissions. How might you reduce them? How can you reduce your, electricity or gas and other related impacts in that carbon footprint, and be led by them, because they're quite often the experts and they know where waste is and where they could be doing better. And then the third step is about sort of communicating your progress. And this is about openness, it's about transparency, it's about trust, but it's also about reporting your achievements, So we're sort of seeing great progress being made by companies. And when they communicate it, it encourages others to follow suit. And that's where great knowledge sharing is, and where you can really sort of inspire wider action.
Well, so that's where the Planet Mark logo comes in, and they're able to proudly display it in their buildings, aren't they?
Yes, and we find it in the most sort of incredible places. So it arrives on packaging sometimes. So if you're trying to communicate, and actually you've eradicated unnecessary plastic, from which within logistics is such a critical sort of aspect, and people at home, like to see sort of get rid of single-use plastic. So we see the sort of certification can be used, as a communication tool for the company. In this case, sort of a great tenant of GLP, to be saying, well, look, we're on this sustainability journey together, and this is what we're doing and looking to achieve through it.
And the engagement with the employees is through a series of workshops. What's a kind of typical thing that pops up in a workshop for you?
All sorts of stuff. But I tell you what always happens is that we talk about the knowledge in the room. So we do these online, or we do them in person, or a hybrid of the two. We have engagement specialists. And so when you show a carbon footprint, and if you're going to just imagine a pie chart in front of your eyes now with different coloured segments on it, and the yellow segment might be electricity, the brown one might be gas, and there might be a sort of a blue bit for waste or something. And you say to people, that's your carbon emissions. Now, how might you improve those? The knowledge is absolutely in the room. People in distribution, in logistics, warehouses, they know where they could be doing better. They know where they see waste. They know where they can find ways to reduce, energy, and they'll come up with a myriad of ideas. Key issue then sometimes is to sort of just focus people down on 2 or 3 things and do them really, really well.
So you've got this annual reduction of 5%, I think you said, and that's a minimum, isn't it? But most companies exceed that. They
do. And so we measure the impact of our community as a whole across hundreds of companies. And, in the COVID year, 2020, we saw a reduction in carbon emissions of 24%. So you might be saying, okay, well, look, that could be because of COVID affected so many organisations. But in the last full reporting year, pre-COVID, 2019, companies that we certified cut their carbon emissions by 12%. Now, just to put that into perspective, for net zero and science-based targets, you're looking for a sort of a 4, 5, maybe 6% reduction in carbon emissions per annum, depending on the type of sector that you're in. So if you're getting double digits, you're doing really, really well.
Okay. So, Richard, that's what Planet Mark do as working with a tenant. What are GLP offering with this initiative?
So with everything that Steve's just mentioned in mind, GLP are delighted to be offering a funded 2-year accreditation and partnership with Planet Mark for all of our customers. So for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, we see this as a highly complementary scheme in terms of supporting our customers with their ESG strategies. So our customers across our UK portfolio tend to be at differing stages when it comes to ESG, and the Planet Mark Property Certification Scheme works at all levels. Whether it's for a business that's just setting out in terms of adopting an ESG agenda, or whether they're further down the line in terms of having a strategy and targets already in place.
So it'll work across all of your tenants at different stages.
That's right.
In their
so
process.
It's accessible to all customers depending on regardless of what level of ESG strategy they're.
And then what happens once the customers are connected with the Planet Mark team?
So once our customers become connected with the Planet Mark team, targets are agreed and means achieving those targets are set out and commenced. So we're confident that our customers will without doubt see the value and benefit derived from the scheme and the results in terms of carbon reduction achieved. So we're really hoping for great customer participation with this, and there's really no downside to not take up the offer.
So as Steve mentioned earlier, the peak carbon by 2025 means that this is really urgent process. What do you see happening out of this scheme, Natali?
I think this initiative is just going in the right direction. It's just going the inflow and supported by, the latest IPCC report, which is just raising again the alert around the emergency of climate change. Putting things into context because it helps people to understand actually what we're talking about and what we're trying to achieve. The building and the construction sector is responsible for 39 of the global carbon emissions, and the operational emissions account for 28%. So this is quite, important figures. So if you can start engaging again very early on with your customers, it will just help the alignment. Again, going back to my initial point, help the alignment. And to Stephen's point is that when you start talking to the employees of the customers, they realize that they already know what to do in a way. So this is a very tangible way of programs that support the customers to put an architecture, a structure around the objectives and work along, the pathway to net zero with us. So I've always been a strong believer, and I think working with Planet Mark and with our teams, that working hand in hand with our customers is one of the best ways to achieve the greatest results.
Well, it's a landlord and tenant collaboration that you've got here. But Steve, you also, your work is about collaboration, isn't it?
It is, and I think this is just a great example of that. So, look, somebody's got to take leadership in these situations, and it doesn't always come from regulation or legislation. That undoubtedly helps, right? But we can all take responsibility here. What GLP is saying is, look, in actual fact, we want a long-term and really fruitful, thriving relationship with, our tenants, the companies who occupy the buildings. And we're going to work together because an ESG strategy, sustainability, climate action, it's all interrelated, as that was a sort of starting point. And so actually sort of collaboration is really is sort of a fundamental point here. And I think that Natalie's point, sometimes where some companies don't really know to start, that is a serious issue. Particularly for smaller organisations who are sort of earlier on their journey or feel that they haven't started it yet. So this just takes that problem away. What GLP is saying, look, it's a good programme, it works, companies cut carbon here. It's a 98% or more success rate for companies that cut carbon with a Planet Mark. We're going to pay for you to do it. Yeah. So what we want you to do is just, put some people on the case to create a green team, and let's work together because it's in the mutual interest to cut carbon. And set net zero targets.
Bringing it back to the investors again, Natali, the importance of this Planet Mark accreditation is also about future-proofing of the assets. I mean, that's an important aspect for investors.
Correct. Beyond primarily doing the right things for the planet, I mean, there's a multitude of positive aspects in engaging on these ESG topics. We talk a lot about future-proofing the buildings, and that's right. We need to look into how the building's going to operate in the next 5, 10, 15 years for investors. So engaging early on this discussion, accounting for the right CapEx, accounting for the changing the regulatory environment to respond to this climate change emergency are extremely important to us. And furthermore, we can see already the entire investment world moving into how we can start embedding ESG into assessing an investment, providing financing. Banks are lenders are looking at ESG already linked, funds of financing. So it's extremely important for us as a fund management business to ensure that we are looking at every single way to get responsible investment and returns to investors.
Comes back to the data as well, collecting all the data about the operation of a building. Richard, how do you see this process of collaborating going forwards?
So GLP as a business understands the importance of working collaboratively with our customers, and a key aspect of this is supporting them in any which way we can to decarbonise operations on their journey to ultimately achieving net zero by 2050. We know that this partnership approach reinforces the positive relationships we have with our customers, and long-term positive relations are the bedrock of good business. We have many customers who occupy a number of assets across our portfolio, where the relationship were founded originally through the lease of a single asset. Over time, as their businesses and operational requirements have grown, in the knowledge of the positive relationship that we have with them, coupled with the quality of the product we offer, they've returned to GLP, and we've been able to support them with this expansion. We've seen this with customers such as Whistle, Amazon, Bleckman, and we're hopeful that through this continued collaborative approach, enhanced through the introduction of initiatives such as the Planet Mark property certification, we'll further expand on this repeat business for these and other customers. It's a means of differentiation in service offering to that of our competitors.
It's an interesting point, this, Natali, isn't it? That there is a very good business case for this to be part of your work at GLP.
It's a good business thing to do in multiple ways, and actually in two ways. You can look at the human aspect. One, we understand for businesses want to be more responsible. They want their employees are also looking into businesses now in a more critical way. We have, if you're looking at the numbers, by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. So the millennials are really asking for accountability. What are you doing? So they would only look up for businesses that are almost aligned with their value, in terms of ESG. So that, from that standpoint, it's very important. And then you have the investment rationale. Again, going back to my previous point, where it's good for the business in the sense that the earlier you tackle on that, the earlier you actually look at this investment case and how you can maintain and maximize value for your stakeholders, the smoother the path will be.
And what's next then? What do you see GLP doing in this space in the future, in the near future?
A lot of things. I mean, we are a business looking at ways to support our customers, with respect to their operations. We talk a lot about automation. We talk a lot about, EV cars. So there's a multiple way, as we always speak at GLP, we always talk about the ecosystem around logistics. It's not only delivering a building, it's a lot of services around and looking at the most efficient way to operate the buildings. But the imminent ask is reducing carbon emissions, as we've been talking today, and switching from the fossil, energy driven to green energy.
Yes.
So we're actively engaging with our customers on solar panels, expanding as much as we can, because it's going to do two things: reducing the operating cost for the customers, but also reducing the carbon footprint. So that's something that is very much a priority for us as a business.
So, Richard, what do you see happening in the near future in this space?
Well, through our customers signing up to the Planet Mark scheme, will in effect have a platform of customers with whom we can share best practice amongst ourselves. So the customers that get involved, that have success stories that they can communicate to other customers in terms of methods that they've used to reduce carbon and reduce utility consumption and waste output on their sites, is all beneficial in terms of what we're trying to achieve across the portfolio as a whole here.
And everything you learn on each construction and each new occupancy, like you say, you're passing it on and you're spreading that and the design solutions that work. Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, our construction projects, as and when they're completed, if there's any success stories that come out of those in terms of embodied carbon, then we'd obviously roll that forward into future projects. So our sort of base build specifications constantly evolving as a result of that.
What about the actual monitoring of the operational energy and performance?
So in all our new construction projects, we are looking to install a building analytics system, which enables our customers to monitor not only utility consumption, but also just how they actually use the building. So it monitors things like the number of times that dock doors open, which dock doors open, and it enables them to be able to manage the buildings much more efficiently. And they can pick up on areas maybe where they're not utilising the space as best as possible, or if there's areas where they can potentially, for example, put dock doors out of action, then it allows them to sort of visualise how they're using the site and how to make better use of it more efficiently. With some of our slightly older assets, we don't actually have any smart metering installed at present. So there isn't a means of remotely monitoring utility consumption. So we're at the early stages of a project at the moment where we're looking to potentially roll out smart metering across all assets where we don't presently have that technology in place. So that's another project that sort of goes in hand with the Planet Mark initiative that we're talking about now, but it's also sort of something else that we're looking to roll out over the course of the year.
Well, it's about sharing that new learning that you're making, that everyone is discovering as they go. Stephen, do you think you're going to be learning anything as you work in this logistics space?
We always do, and without fail, because sustainability and the different types of technology, the actions that people are taking is moving so incredibly quickly, and it needs to. So, to be frank, this is like a hotbed of innovation. And we're sort of seeing leadership here with GLP saying, right, look, in actual fact, we sort of recognise the mutual benefit to our organisations if we partner up on driving an ESG programme. As Natali and Richard have said, there's just so many benefits there. What we will do is we're going to roll our sleeves up and get onto each and every site, talk to people about the operation of these, large properties, and get granular with it. And it'll be, using great data, that would be in a pool, from the business operations, look at the carbon footprint and encourage people to cut it, which means they're going to have to think again. So if you're kind of going from granular to really, really big this way, I know we started the other way around, but if you remember what Mark Carney, the former governor of Bank of England, said, he's now UN Special Envoy for Climate. He said, look, this is a whole economy adjustment. And this is sort of, the pace of change and the scale of change is unprecedented and almost might be unrecognisable. It's going to happen very, very quickly, and it's already underway. So we kind of start with these granular issues in this instance, but then we will uncover stuff that will be, entirely replicable. And people are innovating so quickly, and with these sort of collaborative relationships already in place, as they will be here, then you can roll out those sort of innovations and those new service provisions.
Well, it's a very positive idea. And I think that something we didn't mention earlier, but there is an appetite from business for these initiatives. So, Steve, perhaps I could just ask you to summarise what this scheme is and how you see it working.
Thanks. Yeah. So, look, this scheme is to help every tenant of GLP in the UK to set and hit credible carbon reduction targets for their building in that estate. And that's going to include, number one, it's about measuring their carbon footprint, which we will be doing for them based on their own evidence-based data. Secondly, we'll be engaging their employees in the process to drive those improvements so it becomes like a cultural activity. And thirdly, we'll be communicating their achievements, both within, GLP and to themselves and their own employees, but also out to their own stakeholders, the tenants, stakeholders and customers. So they'll get the Planet Mark certificate awarded, and the whole programme is funded and paid for by GLP for a 2-year period.
Sounds like a good deal. Okay, great. Well, if I could have some closing thoughts from each of you, just a short summary of this journey to net zero. Steve?
Yeah, so just, we're days after the latest IPCC report, which said we've got a short window where we need to tackle climate change. And for us, business leads the way. This is an example of what, how businesses will collaborate and how we're going to sort of transform the economy into something which is going to be cleaner and healthier and more harmonious for, all of our passengers on planet Earth.
Natali?
Yeah, I think something that is obvious is that we can't only wait for responding to government, measures or requirements coming up. Businesses need to take ownership and to lead the way. And I hope this demonstrates how we've been actively trying to engage and respond to the climate risk agenda. As best as we can.
We've been distracted, obviously, by all the other news that's out there, but climate change is the most fundamental.
It is.
Yeah. Richard, a closing thought from you.
Well, I'd just like to encourage all of our customers to sign up to the initiative. There really is no downside in not signing up to it.
If your occupiers and tenants are listening to this and they're interested, what should they do?
Sure, the quickest way to find out more about the scheme is to log on to www.eu.glp.com/planetmark.
And that will have all the information, who to contact and so on.
All the information will be on there. There's a means for clicking a button that connects customers to myself and my colleague. Yeah, we'll immediately come back and provide more information.
Excellent. Well, that's all we've got time for today. My thanks to today's experts, Natali Cooper.
Thank you.
Richard Allington.
Thank you.
And Steve Malkin from Planet Mark.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Shearer. Thanks for listening to this episode of G-Talk Ask the Expert. Be sure to subscribe to future episodes wherever you download your podcasts from. And to find out more, visit the website at eu.glp.com.